Maple syrup. Hey, Erica would be proud of me because that one actually almost sounded like a song. And it's only 3 chords, but I got to get a strumming pattern down and all that stuff. So it's got to be a little more exciting eventually. But welcome to Maple Syrup. It is 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, or not Eastern Standard Time. I guess it's just Eastern Time because we're in dark winter nights here in Canada. What about you? Where are you? You're in from New York, right?
Yes, I'm currently in northern Manhattan.
Northern Manhattan, and so it is dark and cold there as well, I guess.
Yes, it is unreasonably dark at 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
I take a nap. I wake up and oh, did I nap for too long? No, it was literally 20 minutes, but it's dark now. So
that's all right. It's as I get older, I think I nap more. I look
we should
forward to my nap.
normalize napping. There's so much research that shows 20-minute power naps make you feel better, make you work better, make everything better, and offices should have nap rooms. So.
We should make a game about naps. Actually, we actually do have a nap room at the college. I don't know if you have one at your college. We have napping pods.
That's excellent, and NYU should have made them when they made the game center and like when they renovated it. They should have added napping pods. They added like telephone rooms where you can go into this cubicle and take phone calls. They should have added nap pods.
I mean, you could literally just go into that cubicle and
just
hold the phone up to your ear and rest on it.
But it's a very narrow room, you know, so it's not
all the better for holding you in a semi-upright position to like make it look like you're awake.
Yeah, so I think it's ideal for pretending to work while napping, but not ideal for the actual napping.
Yeah, and if you're pretending to work while napping, aren't you really just doing work?
Right, because the pretense of work is what a lot of people do after 2 p.m. every day. So
yeah, so there you go. Yeah, it's funny though. They won't let faculty use them. They're like only for student use. What? I know, right? You think, normally faculty has a lot of perks, but not for the sleeping pods.
Then you should get the union to like complain.
Oh, don't even talk to me about the union. We're about to strike, I think. So I don't. We've got a lot going on. More than sleeping pods. Yeah, I just got we're having a vote to strike. I just got my PIN number for voting, so not exactly the happiest camper in the world, but because it'll be the second time in 5 years, and it'll be during winter, and I don't know if I can walk during winter. Feel it in my bones, man. I'm getting old. I used to be like immune to cold, but no, not anymore. So anyway.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But enough about my life and the possibility of a college-wide system strike in Ontario. Let's talk about your life. Care to introduce yourself, sir?
Yeah. So my name is Sharang Biswas. I am a game designer, interactive artist, writer, and professor. And I live in New York.
Yeah. So like all the cool things.
I was giving a guest lecture at a university in the Midwest, and then they asked me if I wanted to help judge the undergrad theses, the studio art theses. Yeah. And I'm like, sure. And I went there, and then the faculty is introducing me, like, and this is Sharang. He's an artist from New York. And the students were like, oh, and I'm like, I guess that's true.
It is true, but it's also weird that you put the inflection on.
It was very funny. Funny.
It's like being a fake artist who goes to New York, if you've ever played that game. I guess New York has this allure to it, right? Did you grow up in New York? I don't think you did.
Absolutely not. I was born in New Delhi. And in India, and then I grew up in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates, and I moved to New Hampshire for undergrad, and then I moved to New York for grad school, and then I just stayed in New York after grad school.
Right, there you go. And you have a Dartmouth.
Oh yeah, I went to New Hampshire.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And then you did your grad schooling in New York, and where'd you go?
So I went to Tisch School of the Arts at NYU. I did their ITP program, which when it was founded was called the Interactive Telecommunications Program, but no one uses the word telecommunications anymore. So they like to just call
No.
it ITP now because they don't want to change the name too much. But but okay, it's like an art tech design program, but it doesn't sound very cutting edge if they're using the word
It
telecommunications.
really does. That like really dates it. That's like 80s, 90s,
Yeah,
maybe.
the program was founded late 70s, and
Yeah.
but they don't want to change the
Oh, in the
name.
70s. In the
Yeah,
70s, that would have totally been cutting edge.
they're
That's
like,
like
ooh,
bleeding edge.
futurism, futurism.
Oh my
But
gosh.
so yeah, when people ask me what did you say, I'm like, oh, my master's in interactive design. So yeah.
Yeah. So tell us a bit about interactive design and why'd you get into that and how did that have that allure to you when everybody else was like, computer programming 101 and engineering and you were like, ooh, interactive narrative design.
Yeah. At Dartmouth, my freshman year, I took a game design class with Mary Flanagan, right? And
Oh,
Mary
well, there you go.
Flanagan, exactly, as you know, Mary Flanagan, she does all kinds of stuff, right? Like she's a
Mhm.
multidisciplinary person, but a lot of her game stuff currently focuses on analog stuff, right? Like she's a lot of board game, things like that. So I took class with her first, and I'm like, ooh, wow, right, games don't grow on trees. Someone must make them.
Right.
Um,
Right.
right. And so that was interesting. And then after that, I majored in engineering. I have two engineering degrees from Dartmouth, right? And so I was doing engineering, but Dartmouth is a liberal arts program, so you do a lot of other stuff at the same time. So I did like a lot of liberal arts stuff, which I was really enjoying. And then I interned with Mary Flanagan. I worked at the game lab. I TA'd for her. I did a lot of stuff. And then my final year, when I was finishing my second degree, I was thinking like, well, what do I want to do with my life? College, the 5 years are finally ending.
Right.
Now what? And then I'm like, I don't think I like engineering, even though I'm finishing my second degree. I'm designing a poop juice making machine,
What?
which won two national awards with my
What?
team. Yeah, my thesis for my second engineering degree was about fecal microbiota transplantation.
Very
Um,
fun. Poop juicer.
yeah, it was literally a poop juicer. Like that's literally what, and it was inspired by a class I took my freshman year in the anthropology department about the Aztecs.
Very
Um,
neat.
yeah, like so that's why liberal arts are cool. Learn a lot of things. Who knows what'll inspire you, right?
Right.
Um, but at that time, I'm like, what did I enjoy? I enjoyed certain aspects of engineering. I'm like, wait, I really enjoyed the game stuff I've been doing. So I'm like, well, let me look into that. Now, I didn't want to apply for game design grad school because I thought I wanted to be as flexible as possible.
Mhm.
And so I didn't apply like the game center or anything. I applied to this program at NYU instead.
Yeah.
But I still took games classes when I was there. So
Right.
you might know Greg Trefry, the founder of
Mhm.
Gigantic Mechanic. He was one of my professors for a little while. And yeah, so I did game stuff there. And after I graduated from my master's, I thought when I started my master's, I thought at the end I'll have more focus. I did not. I still took a very broad program about interdisciplinary arts. I'm like, well, what do I do? And I'm like, well, while I do odd jobs, let me keep making game things because I like it.
Mhm.
Like my thesis was interactive theater. At the same time as I was doing that, my co-designer from undergrad, Max Seidman, and I were making Mad Science Foundation.
Yep.
You remember that,
Oh
Senfu,
yeah.
because you awarded us with our first award for
Yeah.
that game.
It
And
was
I
awesome.
only realized 4 years later, after knowing you for a while, that oh right, that had
That's
been
the guy.
you. Um, but and so that had some success, and then I made some interactive theater. I'd taken, and I'm like, I'm liking this. I started doing more and more games things. I guess the rest is history. Though I mean, there are other stuff like I started getting into like role playing games in college. But then in 2016, I went to my first major LARP, like not major, I should say, like 360-degree LARP. And so like all these different experiences like bubbled together, and I do all kinds of things now.
You realize that, and this is speaking as one Asian to another Asian, that you are the Asian parent's worst nightmare.
Oh, absolutely, right?
You're literally the.
Like my
I thought my parents were
teachers.
mad at me.
Oh yeah, my teachers in high school would be horrified if I gave up my like double engineering degree career, and like went to art school and make not that much money right now making independent games, you know?
Right. So
So
funny. But you know what? Screw them
yay!
and their idea of what Asians can do.
Yay! We can do anything we put our minds
Ah,
to.
it's so funny. It's
Because
so
we're
very funny.
hot and cool at the
Yes,
same
apparently.
time.
Yeah, right? So your origin story takes like wild swings at various establishments that are
Yeah,
like
I had
preconceived
a
notions of what we should be able to do.
I had a 2 year stint in corporate consulting for a hot second.
I didn't
Um,
know that.
oh yeah, yeah. From 2017 to 2019, I worked at a corporate consulting firm.
Oh
And that's
wow.
where I made my savings, which is why I could
Oh,
survive during 2020, where I didn't have that many gigs, but I had a lot of savings.
right. Okay.
So
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, yay capitalism.
you got to make it work for you, right?
Yeah. I mean, you gotta eat. You gotta live. And New York is
Yeah.
New York. So I
New
mean,
York is
what are you
New
gonna do?
York.
And as we know, when you tell some undergrads from the Midwest that you're from New
New
York,
York.
you get all the benefits thereof. So
Exactly.
that's
So
so
it's not
funny.
like, oh, what do you do? Oh, I'm currently artist in residence at the Museum of Moving Image in New York.
Yeah, you know what? That is the funniest title ever. Whenever we talk about it, I hope you know that we're completely mocking you. Like our team completely mocks you.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
But it's the best mocking ever because we're also jealous at the same time. So
I think I might also be the youngest member of the
you
team,
probably are.
unless Mendes, because I'm like a few months younger than Yansu. But this
Right.
is for those of you watching. This is the Avatar design team.
Yeah. I am definitely the oldest. I am definitely the Uncle Iroh of the group. You may be the Ang. You may be the Ang. Who
I might
knows?
be, unless Mendez is younger, which I don't know, but I know I'm younger than
Well, we can
Yansu,
ask
so
him. We can
we will
totally
ask
ask him
Mendez.
sometime. Um, so so you did consulting. You're doing teaching. Tell us about the residency that you have, because
Yes,
that is something that like not every game designer ever is going to get. That is like a
yeah.
rare bird. Tell
It's
us
really
about that.
cool. It's really cool. So I've been doing stuff with the Museum of the Moving Image for like half a decade. No, for
Mhm.
like 8 years now, right? So
Yeah.
way back when, I met someone who talked to me. Oh, no, I applied to a job there to be a teen coordinator or something, like a part-time job,
Hmm.
and my resume was full of all my game stuff, right? And so they're like, "Hey, we're not going to pick you to be. We found a better candidate. However, we like your game stuff. We're teaching a teen class. Do you want to come give a guest lecture?" I
Right.
gave the guest lecture, and they're like, "Actually, that was a trial to ask you to teach the teen class in summer." And I'm like, "Oh,
Surprise.
sure. Yeah, kind of, right?" They had a grant, and I'm like, "Sure." I taught it. I loved it, right? I taught it for a couple of years. I went through 3 different heads of education at the MOMI. Um, and then each time I was like, "Hey," they probably had notes about me. One of the
Yeah.
heads knew me because she got promoted to be head, like all this stuff, right? Um, and then um, so like I did like workshop and all this thing with the MOMI, and then right before the pandemic started, the head of education, the new head of the current head of education, Sarah, she asked me and my co-designer Nick O'Leary to they in conjunction with the Jim Henson Foundation commissioned us to make a LARP about their new exhibition called Dark Crystal Creatures of Thra, which
Right.
was based on the TV show.
Hmm.
They had an exhibition about the monster design and costuming of the monsters and creatures. And
Because it's
so
awesome.
it is awesome.
Yeah, it
And
is.
there was a big event with like Jim Henson's granddaughters and all the puppeteers and stuff. They came, did a whole thing. And the end of the event was a American freeform style LARP that was using site specific elements of the museum to tell
Hmm.
this like Dark Crystal story. It literally started the LARP. Technically, we designed it to be like 3 months before the show started, something like
Yeah,
that, right? And that was very successful, if I may say so myself.
you may.
It was very successful.
Thank you.
It did really well. Jim Henson's granddaughter told me she liked my work, which is kind of cool.
Well,
Um,
yeah, I mean, come on.
it's
Jim
kind of
Henson's
cool.
kind of and
A
the
big
granddaughter.
deal.
Come on, it's a big deal.
Yeah. And so after that, the museum was like, and I'd done some small things in the museum in the meantime. I'd written curricula, I'd done all this stuff. So they're like, hey, do you want to do a residency with us? So I'm the artist in residence. I'm the game artist in residence, but I'm attached to the education department, less to the curatorial department.
That makes
Um,
sense. Yeah.
yeah. And yeah, and so that was cool. Over the pandemic, I like ran a couple of series of like indie games. Um, I which were like long, like every week or every couple of weeks we'd run one indie game. I did a panel about when it was when like WandaVision and all that
Yeah.
was in the height of those. Like I brought together Naomi Clark from NYU, who knows a lot about comics. There was a film curator from the museum, and then there was a comic store owner from Queens, and me, and we did a panel talk about superheroes
Very
representation in
cool.
media. Then the museum commissioned me to design a solo LARP to play within the gallery space to like discover the artifacts in the
Right.
museum. It's a solo LARP that involves like NPCs, so like we got the ed team and myself to like perform. That was really cool. And then in 2 weeks, so week after, so next Friday, my MFA student, well, actually, it's a mix of MFA and undergrad students at NYU are showcasing their final projects at the museum as like a game night. It's
Very
all
cool.
short role playing games. Yeah.
Now, is that something that you kind of put together
Yes.
between the MOMI and the university? Yes.
I did that when I used to teach at the Institute of Contemporary, sorry, at the International Center of Photography.
Yeah.
My MFA students there, I'm like, okay, we're going to show you. They had a looser assignment. Sandy, you there?
I'm here.
Yeah, they had a looser assignment. They just had to make interactive projects, and I showed them at the museum, and that went really well. So this year, I'm like, hey, I don't teach there anymore, but I teach at NYU. So these are going to be more focused games. But would you be down for that? And they're like, absolutely, because the museum is very interested in games, right? The
Mhm.
Museum of the Moving Image is the first fine arts museum in the world to showcase video games at an exhibition in the late 70s. I think it was the
Wow.
Hot Circuits exhibition. So the museum has always been at the
Around the
forefront
same
of games.
time that program got started.
Oh, exactly, right? Lol. Yeah, it's really cool. The museum's really like into game. The museum used to host Indiecade East for many years,
Oh, that's right. That's
right?
true. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
So the museum's always been interested in games, and so I'm there. I do more analog games, as you know, as the
Of course.
listeners here probably guessed, than digital games, but they're still really interested in game stuff. Yeah, and then next year we're planning some more events. Yeah, lots of exciting things coming at the MOMI about games
That's wonderful.
involving me.
Yeah, so if you are in the New York area or can get there and want to see what Sharang is up to in terms of games at the Museum of Moving Images, get out there and you can find all the stuff. It sounds very, very cool. And I like that the museum is using games in order to get people to engage more in their curated exhibitions, right?
Yes.
Which is sort of the hardest thing to do um, as a museum is to like, are people really looking at what we put up? Are
Yeah,
they
because
into this stuff?
right, different people look at art differently, right?
Yeah, for
Different
sure.
people engage differently. So I think this is just I'm not the kind of games edu person who are like games are the best way of learning. I don't believe that, right?
No,
But I believe games are a way
a
of
way.
learning,
Yeah.
right? And it's and games will engage you with the art. At least I hope so with my game. Engage. I mean, I think so. The reviews were good. The players said that made them think of
Yeah,
the art
they
differently.
had
But yeah,
fun.
the aim is to like look at this artwork in a different way, think about it in a different way, think about how it connects to you as a person. Like, what does art mean to you?
Yep.
Um, yeah, and I tried to make like a lot of times when museums do game things, they're like targeted to children.
Yes.
Most of the games I design, I do not target to children. Many of the games I design are absolutely not for children,
We'll talk
right?
about that later. That's
We will
later.
talk about that, right? But I never did because designing for children is hard, and just to put it simply, I'm lazy. Designing for kids is very, very challenging.
Yes.
You have children, Sen. I'm sure you
It
can
is challenging.
attest,
Kids are challenging. They
right?
are.
And
Yep.
so the game I was commissioned to make for the museum, both of them, right? The LARP that I made with Nick O'Leary and the solo LARP I made myself, we didn't have children in mind. In fact, we said recommended like 13 plus to play these games.
Yeah.
Right, because the one I made is about like it's a reflective game, and you talk to NPCs about the nature of like art and what do humans make, and I don't think an 8-year-old would necessarily like that. In fact, I know they wouldn't, because one parent couple brought their 8-year-old, even though we said it was like 13
Yeah.
plus
They're like,
recommended,
he didn't really
and
like
yeah, and the kid got really bored, and I'm like,
Sure.
I know what I'm doing.
I am a game designer.
I'm a game designer, so and I have
Uh,
taught children, and I know it's
yeah,
hard.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I mean, it's but it's still so interesting. I think that you know, some places are willing to go out on a limb, literally, and say, "Okay, try this weird new thing, and we'll give you like a license to do it."
Yeah.
And before we went on air, Sharang and I were talking about our games art, and this is definitely something that would kind of push us in that direction of saying, "Well, yeah, I think they are." I think they are a form of art, and we'll continue that thread as we go. Just wanted to say hello to Zach Connolly, who is saying "Woohoo, New York!" He is
Oh, he
also
should
from New
come
York.
to the Museum of the Moving Image.
Yeah, and he naps every day at lunch. And Adam Young is also on Team Invol. Oh, he's on Team Involuntary Nap.
Sometimes the involuntary
Fall
naps are the
asleep.
ones that you need the most.
They kind of are. Your body's talking to you. And Allison Chase and Amy Bayo say hello. Those are a couple of our former guests on the show. If anybody has questions for our guest this week, Sharang, please do type them into chat and we'll get to them. But let's move on. Sharang, can you tell us a little bit about your design philosophy? Can you articulate for us what makes a game your game, if you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
what's the
yeah,
indelible fingerprint that you put on every game that you make,
yeah. Also,
or most games,
my
anyways?
flatmate's coming home, so
Oh, hello,
um,
hello, flatmate.
so the one thing, of course, is that I make a lot of kind of work, right? I don't just make one kind of game, and I don't just make one kind of thing either, right? Like the last year, I've been publishing a ton of fiction, just like prose, right?
Yep.
So I think I make different works differently. I make different media differently, and probably different work differently as well, right? But one thing I like focus on a lot when I make games is, for me, games are all about verbs, right? Or maybe we wouldn't say
Okay.
all, but a large thing of games is the verbs, right? It's different from reading a book where you're just doing one verb and it's always the same verb. Any book you read, you're reading, right? Or
Right.
watching a
Okay.
movie or listening to music, right? Unless, of course, they're weird experimental things, but then they're not regular books and they're weird experimental things, right? So games, however, every game has different verbs, right?
Yeah.
In one of two ways. Either you are representing many kinds of verbs with a small subset of them. So you're maybe many different games, you're rolling dice, but you're doing something else. You're representing a different verb by rolling those dice, right? Or you are playing a game in which you are doing other verbs as well, right? So like Potion Explosion, right? That board game, you're
Hmm.
like aligning marbles and letting them fall and things like that, right? Mousetrap, you are building this like weird Rube Goldberg like machine, right? Um, uh, um, if you're playing, I don't know, Spin the Bottle, which is a game in some sense, you're making out with people, right? I've tried to make games which use non-traditional verbs in role-playing games, right? So
That's a
like,
really interesting way of looking at it. Like, really, I don't think I've ever heard anybody talk about it in terms of just verbs.
oh yeah, yeah, I'm like so okay. So a lot of people know me for my game Feast, right?
Yes.
My game Feast won me an Indicate Award. It was shown in the Institute of Contemporary Art in Philadelphia. It's like done a lot of things, right? When I made Feast, I was like, okay, I want to make a game for this contest. What I want to pick verbs that I enjoy. Well, I enjoy eating and I enjoy sex. Well, I have to pick one of them. Let me pick eating as my verb. So I picked eating, and I'm like, okay, well, if the game is about if I want the player to eat in the game, what can it represent in game to like marry well with the physicality of what the player is doing, right? So the
Right.
game is about consuming the thoughts and memories of a host when you are an alien or a ghost or a demon possessing them, right? And
Right.
and to consume their thoughts and memories, you eat real food at the
Yeah.
table that you have cooked under certain specifications, right? When I showed it at the museum at the Institute of Contemporary Art, we didn't cook the food; we just ordered food. But um,
But
but
there you go.
right,
Because you're lazy, remember?
and because the gallery was paying for it,
Oh,
so
there you go. Yeah,
uh,
see that.
so 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 there again, the verb is important. I'm like, well, what is the verb I want the players to engage in? Food, eating food. And what is the verb I want that to model? Consuming the memories of your
Oh, I
human
see how you're
host,
doing it. I see
right?
how you're doing it. I get it.
Right, and I do that a lot. So a more traditional game I've made Hex Ed, right, which is in the You and
Yeah.
I anthology, right? It's one of the few games I've made that's a role playing game that uses dice, right? Most of my role playing games don't have dice, um, and I wanted it to be about being in wizard school, but it was about how difficult it is to balance your life as a student.
Okay, before we say anything,
Yeah,
why are you so into wizard school?
I'm so into wizard school, Sen.
Yes, I
I
know. Sharang today was just going on about Strixhaven and
I
wizard
mean, I
schools,
wrote
and
for Strixhaven
I
for
know you
Magic,
wrote for
right? And it
Strixhaven.
got cut, unfortunately. But when I was assigned it, I'm like, absolutely yes. And then Magic School Mystery, which is, I think, by Tanner Wilson, which is a recent RPG about Wizard School, came out. I use it in an article I wrote on Dicebreaker. And then Lighthearted, which is the Wizard Community College game. I'm like soon gonna run a one-shot of it. I just love supernatural school. I love mosques as well, but I always make it more about the school than anything else.
You like it.
Give me schools with supernatural powers, and I
Why?
will. Yeah,
Why? Why though?
I don't know. I mean, I really love coming of age stories.
Yeah, me too.
They're very cool to me. I really love a lot of the tropes in that kind of
Hmm.
genre. I just finished reading Naomi Novik's Deadly Education and Last Graduate, which are phenomenal and a wild subversion of the wizard school genre. Recommendation for everyone.
Can you
Um,
tell me those titles again?
yeah, so by Naomi Novik, the first book is called A Deadly Education,
Okay.
and the second book is called The Last Graduate. And the conceit is, what if you went to wizard school where the school was actively trying to kill every single one of its students? And there are no
Ah,
professors, and you have
oh,
to teach yourself. And if you don't teach yourself
you
fast
die.
enough, you just die because you cannot fight off the school.
That is such an interesting. That's Christmas reading for me, man. That sounds
It's
awesome.
oh my god, they're so good. Oh, and I'm like, oh my god,
So,
even the straight romance in them is compelling to me.
wow, then it must be well written too. So you're very into things like did you like The Magicians?
I read the first two books. I liked them a lot. I was skeptical about the show because, and this is my, I'm not assigning value. This is my preference. Most Sci-Fi Network shows I've watched I haven't really liked.
Yeah, I
Um,
get it.
So I had low expectations, but I started watching it, and the first episode, I'm like, okay, this is better than I thought. And then it actually got pretty good. Like I remember in the first season, the World in the Walls episode, I think the
Yep.
fifth episode, I was like, that's an excellent episode. And then later on, it gets really emotional. Like I haven't watched the latest season yet, and I'm behind. But the season before the latest one, it was getting really emotional, and I was like,
I'm quite behind. I think I watched the first two seasons and
right.
I kind of fell out of it in the second season, but I really did like the first season.
It was
And I
one of
never
the
read the book,
shows.
so.
Right. It was one. I mean, the weird thing about me is I fall out of things even if I like them. Right.
Yeah,
Like I
me
just.
too. It's
But that was
fine.
one of the shows that my ex-husband and I watched together, and so
Right.
it was like a date night. We'd be like, okay, tonight we're watching The Magicians, and so we kept up with it. So and
Right.
then we got divorced, and as you can see, I haven't watched the latest season yet. So
There you go, right?
my flatmate says I should watch it with her.
You should. You should totally own that thing. Don't let it become part of that negative relationship thing that happened. The so do you like X-Men Evolution and stuff like that, where it's like superheroes in high school, or is it just magic?
I mean, no. I'm all. I mean, I prefer. I like the trappings of the fantasy genre more than the sci-fi genre, and that's
Yeah,
just an aesthetic reason. It's not
sure.
any philosophical reason, or artistic reason. Um, I I like X-Men kind of things, right?
Yeah.
I'm not a big comic reader, and I
Yeah.
didn't really watch the cartoons as a kid because I grew up in India. I was in India at that
Yeah.
time. But I would like if you like I do and have watched like teen superhero shows. There have been a number, some lesser
Hmm.
known ones I used to watch when I was in Abu Dhabi as well. Um, I think Mutant X was one of
Yeah.
them,
That was filmed in
right?
Canada.
Oh, a lot of them are filmed in
Oh,
Canada.
yes, because it's
Um,
cheaper. And it looks
but
like America. So,
yeah, but a lot of them weren't very high quality. The shows weren't very high
no,
quality.
they were worse than sci-fi quality at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I like the X-Men movie. My flatmate got me into watching My Hero Academia.
Oh, yeah. Well, so there you go. There's a
Yeah.
school thing.
It's a
And
same supernatural powers
yep.
at school. And my favorite episodes are always not the like, oh my god, villains. Oh, they're great episodes. They're more like, we're moving into our new dorm rooms. Let's check it out. Or like, we're doing a school band. Let's practice. Those are my
Okay, the
favorite
school band
episodes.
one was awesome.
Those are my favorite episodes. They're amazing.
I actually just caught. I'm almost caught up. I'm at like episode 108, I think, or
Yeah,
109.
my flatmates watched all of it, but she's watching them again with me, and we're on season 4.
What a kind flatmate. I mean, of course, watching them again is not a big deal when it's as good as it is. It's just so.
Um,
It's a good show. I enjoy it quite a bit.
Yeah, but like so when I designed Hexed, I really wanted to that game was about the stress of being a student. It was about how
Right.
difficult it is to balance in that game. You have to balance sleep, socializing, and studies, right?
Right. So the verb was balance then.
Yes, and so you have I kind of modified Lady Blackbird's dice pool where you like
Sure.
lose dice from your pool, and you can sleep to gain dice back. But if you're sleeping, then you're not studying,
Oh.
right? And at the end of the game, the DM it's a short like 1 to 2 hour one player one DM game. At the end of the game, you get graded. You get a grade from the GM, and if you haven't studied enough, your dice roll will be poor, and you'll get a bad grade.
I should literally play this with my own students.
Yeah,
Just to show them how to balance their lives, because so it's funny, and I do this all the time, like, and they don't understand why. The students don't understand why. It's like, okay, I'm taking the best 2 out of 3 from that pack of grades, right? They're going, well, but I wanted, but I don't have to do them all. No, you don't have to do them all. I get a choice. Yeah, you get a choice. Why did you do that? Because I know your life is hard. And I know if you plan right and you do the first 2, that during exams you won't have to do the last one.
third
That's what I
one.
really
Yep,
want
yep,
you to
yep.
do. But if you kind of say, well, no, you know what? I have to go on this family trip. It's a wedding and blah, blah, blah. I can't do the second one. Then at least you have the third one. You have an out. That's what
Yep,
I'm giving
yep.
you. Use
And
it.
so that game about that, and then I made another Magic School game called Basic Principles of Incantation, and that's a live theatrical sort of game. And that was inspired by like how in many books of Magic School, like they're like, oh my god, magic is so hard, you have to learn it for years. But when they actually show the person doing magic, they just like say a couple of words and then
It's
right.
done.
So we made it. So Max Seidman, who made Mad Science with me, we wrote a textbook. And the magic system is based on real world linguistics.
Right.
So to play the game, you have to like look in the textbook and try and pronounce these difficult sounds. I know a little bit about linguistics, so to pronounce these sounds that are not common in English, and you have to like do morphology puzzles and figure out what prefix should I add to my incantation to make it work right now because some set's 2 hours away. It was inspired a little bit by magicians, where they have all these conditions that they have to. So it's inspired by that as well, and that was another magical game. But the verb of that game is studying. We wanted to make a game where you are actually studying.
Yeah, and that's ridiculously interesting that you're actually reading through the textbook and looking up the prefixes and suffixes to combine them in a way that you make this magical word that does a thing.
That does
right?
a thing, and we have a special effects person do special effects. In fact, my current flatmate at that time was not my flatmate and was our first sound designer for the show.
Oh, there you go.
So
see, it all comes full circle. Your life is like a circle.
It's all about knowing cool people.
So that's really interesting because we look at it. Well, me personally, I look at it very similarly to the verb thing, but I've never articulated it like that, and I really love that because that is exactly what I do. It's like, what are we doing in Kingdom Rush? What are we really doing?
Yeah,
right. When we get the game, it's like, what are we really doing, and how can we replicate that? Because the idea of Kingdom Rush in the app version is you're shooting a lot of arrows and bombs and missiles and stuff, and they're walking around. And I'm like, I hate tracking damage. I hate it. Hate
Yep,
it. Hate
yep,
it.
yep.
So how can we do that differently?
Yeah, and you did the overlapping
Yeah, with
pieces.
the polyominoes, right? And so that the verb is, place polyominoes. That's not really a big verb, but
Right, right.
um,
No, but it's like aligning,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
It's
It's
like,
it's like the idea
oh,
of
it
how
can't.
do
We
we do
can't
that?
overlap two things. You can't do this. Like it's
Yeah,
and that's cool and different, right? And when it comes to role playing games, I think another aspect isn't just what verb are you doing, but an aspect is why are you doing this verb, right?
yes,
Because sometimes, or when I do interactive fiction, especially, sometimes like, oh, why is this piece of fiction interactive? Why am I making the player make choices? Why is it not just a short story,
yeah,
right? Or why is this a LARP and why is it not a play, right?
right,
And that's where I think that artistry comes, right? Does the verb do something for the player? Does the verb represent something? Does the act of performing an action add meaning in a way that wouldn't be added if you were just sitting there watching it as a play, right?
right. So
And
I
that's
like that you
important.
actually articulate that as well. It's like the why is this product instead of some other media, some other form
Yeah.
of media. Yeah, and it's not that we have to justify making games, but it certainly helps.
Yeah, and so I was a co-editor with Yansu of Strange Lost, Strange Loves,
Yeah,
right? It's the anthology of interactive erotica on Strange Horizons, right? Two of our stories are up already. And one thing I told, we were telling the team, were like, we absolutely don't have to make a game where, quote, your choices matter, end quote, right? That does not have to be the case. You can have players make a million choices and the storyline is completely linear. That is totally fine. What we want you to think about is, why is this interactive in any way?
huh,
Because games, and we know this from the Telltale games, right? The act of making a choice can make you feel differently about the game, even if the ending does not change,
right. That's
right?
very true. Which Telltale game are you talking about?
I played a couple of them,
Yeah, I
but
actually know.
my favorite one is the one based on that video game, Tales from the Borderlands.
Right.
Yeah, that's my favorite one. I thought it was really well written, but and acted, like really good acting. But like right, like Bruno Diaz has a great essay on SubQ magazine where he talks about sometimes the choice that you don't make is as important as the choice you make, because that says what your character is not. Oh, my character is not mean. I didn't choose the mean choice. I
Right.
picked the
That
nice
is that
choice.
is a really good thing as well to think about. So we talk about that in mind management a lot, where you're
Is
the
that your new
not
game with Banana?
no. There's another couple. I'll talk to you later about that.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a bunch of NDAs in the way of that. But my management's a board game. It's a hidden movement game.
Uh-huh.
And we talk about like the negative being as important as the positive. Like the players get so disgruntled where they don't get information, but they forget that non-information is exactly the same
Yeah.
as information.
Yep. And that's interesting, right? Because the like not like we've talked a lot about doing things, right? But not doing things is also
Hmm.
interesting, right? So like in so the big project I worked on with Lucian, right? That I got 2 grants for, Honey and Hot
Right.
Wax, right?
Yes.
My game is called The Echo of the Unsaid, and it's a game that, so the verb in this game is literally have sex, right? As
Right.
in the players are asked to perform sex acts, real world sex acts with each other, right? Obviously, we have a whole section on like safety
Consent.
and calibration
Yeah.
and consent, and obviously, but that is what the game asks of you if you choose to play it, right? In that way. But the game is all about what happens when you keep having sex with someone but refuse to ever talk about it. So what
Oh,
does it mean? So like
what
in
does
this
that
game,
mean?
you play like frat boys in college, and you have all these like scenes that you're like fratting around and doing college boy stuff, and then you like give the other person a blowjob, and then the next scene starts, and you're supposed to talk about whatever in the next scene. Like and the rules say you are not
Which
supposed to
yeah,
ever talk about the sex that you've had.
which is like the literal trope that you see in like every college movie about, we had sex, but we're not going to talk about it, and we're trying to go on as life is normal, and life isn't normal because
Yeah.
we had sex,
And then the
right?
game has this idea of like where you monologue out like your thoughts, like what are you thinking versus what are you saying, and
Very
then the game ends with So there are three scenes. At the end of the first scene, you do hand jobs. At the end of the second scene, you do blow jobs. At the end of the third scene, and it's blow jobs in character, so any gender, any anatomy can play the game,
Yeah.
right? And then the end of the third scene, you make out. And then the ending of the game, you stare into the other person's eyes for 3 minutes, and you decide yourself and never voice it aloud what happens to the characters.
And again,
At the end.
that's really interesting because we're exploring negative space again in a different way, right? Where it's
Yeah.
not visual negative space, but it's the absence of talk.
Procedural negative
Yeah,
space.
I don't know what to call it, but the absence of speech, the
Yeah, yeah.
absence of those ideas. But in that way, it's actually almost more powerful because it's words that are left unsaid, which is again that kind of unrequited feeling that you get with some of these college relationships and like little like one night stands, 3-week hookups or whatever that maybe some of us have had during those college years because we
Yep.
were
And
young
it's
and
I also
experimental.
want it to be about like exact experimental. That's a good word. Like a lot of people, try like don't talk, like repress parts of their sexuality,
Sure.
right? Whether it's you're queer or not, or whether it's like I don't know, you're into water sports, right? Or you're into like water polo in the sexual sense, not like
Yes.
water polo.
Not like polo.
Yeah. Or like you're into like BDSM, right?
Why did we both think of water polo as the
What
water sport?
other water sports do you think of?
I don't know, like
There
swimming?
you
I
go.
don't know.
Right. Synchronized swimming. Um, my ex-husband's boyfriend is a very talented synchronized swimmer, which is why I thought of that.
There you go.
But yeah. So yeah, and so a lot of people don't talk about various aspects of their sexuality,
Mhm.
right? And so I wanted the game to be kind of this game was it took me the longest to conceptualize. Like normally
Yeah,
I
it would be
conceptualize a
very
game.
strange.
Right, and then I conceptualized fairly early, and then I work through it. This game took me so long to conceptualize. Oh my god, it was very challenging.
So you've moved us very nicely through our segues. Just have
Almost
you
as though I'm a
know.
professional speaker.
Right. Maybe an artist in residence. Game artist in residence. Sorry. Let's get specific here.
Yeah, there's a different
Two.
artist in residence.
There is.
There's also a puppet artist in residence.
Are you kidding me? That's the best. I love puppets. I really do. Unless they're scary, and then I don't like them.
No, it's a like Sesame Street puppet. Yeah.
Even better. Even better. Let's talk about erotica on the tabletop because that is sort of what you're known for, to be honest.
I'm also known to be on the design team of Avatar: The Last Airbender.
You are, but more erotica. So also erotica. How about that?
There
You're
we go.
equally known for writing about erotica specifically around or adjacent to tabletop role playing games, also in tabletop role playing games, also about tabletop role playing games. What is it about the idea of erotica and tabletop that you think goes together like chocolate and peanut butter?
Yeah. Chocolate peanut butter is one of my lesser combinations. Let's say hazelnut and chocolate, right?
Okay, let's do that one.
Hazelnut and chocolate. So I'm just interested in sexuality in general.
Sure.
That's something I'm interested in, somewhat academically, somewhat experientially, somewhat just casually, right? I'm interested in that kind of stuff, right? And when artists make work, they don't always, but often it's related to things they're interested in about the world, right?
Sure.
Sometimes artists make work just like this is fun, but sometimes they're like, oh, this is about something I'm interested in about the world, right? So I'm interested in queerness and sexuality a lot, right? And games are, just another art form. It's a specific art form which has its own tropes and ways, but they're another art form that we can use to communicate about things, right? And unfortunately, games for some reason, like movies, are about all kinds of things, right?
All kinds of
Right, all kinds of things. Games, for some reason, has become about a very specific kind of thing, right? A large proportion of games is about like human combat, right? And I'm not saying that's bad. I'm not the kind of person to be like games about fighting are terrible. Fighting is a large part of human history and society,
unfortunately, but
right?
yes.
But it is so like it's nothing wrong in making games about large portion of human history and society. but like the human race literally would not exist if it were not for sexuality,
Which is a
right?
larger part of human society if you think about
Right?
it.
And I'm like, okay, so like this is something games should talk about more. All kinds of games talk about more. Video games, role playing games, board games, card games. We already have folk games about sexuality. Many childhood folk games are about sexuality, right?
Oh, really?
Spin the
Oh,
bottle,
yeah, yeah.
7 Minutes in Heaven, those kinds of things. Not
Yes.
like Ring Around the Roses, but
I That's what I was wondering.
yeah,
Really?
yeah. But there are a lot of childhood fairy tales are about sexuality, right? There's a famous analysis of Rumpelstiltskin, which is about the actual thing of the story is like don't masturbate because you will become sterile if you do. Right?
Oh,
There's a big analysis, famous analysis of that. There's a whole like the whole Little Red Riding Hood story involves rape, for example, the original one,
right.
right? So like sexuality is a part of a lot of things, but in like games not geared like in a like games that are not like porn games. Again, nothing wrong with porn games, but games that are not porn games. And I'm saying that I would define a porn game to be a game that whose full purpose is sexual arousal, right?
Right.
In games that aren't that, can we discuss aspects of sexuality in interesting, nuanced ways, right? And I think like some board games are doing this. Like Fog of Love is a lovely board game that talks
Yeah.
about relationships and sexuality, right? Not in the like in like going deep in the like sex part of it, but it's about human intimacy, right?
Mhm.
It's amazing. I love Fog of Love. It's such a good game.
It is. It's
Um,
really interesting.
yeah, and it also does a cool like medium bending. Is it a role playing game somewhat?
Yeah.
But it kind
Right.
of is, right? Um, I'm really into that. I also think that the more we talk about sexuality openly, the less stigmatized it becomes,
Yeah.
and the
Hundred
less
percent.
stigmatized it becomes, the better we'll be equipped in dealing with societal ills that are related to sexuality, right? Like reproductive justice or like sexual assault or like queer phobia, things like that. The more we're openly talking about sexuality in different ways, games being one of them, the
Hmm.
more we can explore the fields and the more we can make the world better. I wrote an article for for Eurogamer last year, and I talked about how it's important for games to grapple with sex, and it's actually indie games, both video games and especially role-playing games, that are doing this in very interesting ways. Check out my
Right.
Dicebreaker article. It's
Yeah.
called Towards More Speculative Sex.
Not speculative fiction, speculative sex. And I think that's a really important point that, we can explore that in so many other mediums without getting lambasted about it for some reason.
Like the
Like,
music industry, 80% of the songs are about like girlfriends and love and
yeah,
hoes or whatever, right?
I mean, I would say even more than that. Like it's a really high. It's a really high percentage of at least pop music.
Yeah, yeah, yes,
That
exactly.
is
That's
that
it
is
is.
about
Yeah.
relationships and loves and WAP and whatnot. And then movies with sexuality or even sensuality or eroticism in it are obviously a very high thing. There's a whole industry that just does that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And
Um,
in literature, even though the romance genre is societally denigrated a lot,
yep.
the romance genre is the most lucrative genre in books. Like in the publishing world, romance far outstrips every other genre in terms of sales.
I have a friend who's a Harlequin romance writer. She's
Right?
awesome. So Harlequin romance is very very popular. And she's like, yeah, this it's no less literature than Chaucer. It's no less literature than any of these other things. It's just written for a different demographic in a different way. There
And
is
for different like
yeah different
purpose. Like,
reasons, right? Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And there's actually a great episode of 99% Invisible about the clutch.
I've listened to that one.
It's amazing
It's such
because
a
it's
good
like
episode.
it's such a good episode. It's like, what is going on with these covers of these
Yeah,
books with like Fabio and everything,
yeah.
and it goes through the history of it. My favorite part is actually when it talks about people of color and black bodies on the cover and all that kind of stuff, because it's really actually very true that there really wasn't any until very very late
Yep,
in
yep.
history, and that books wouldn't
Yeah, the
sell.
Western
You know,
idealized picture of beauty is a white person, right?
yep. Uh, which I was just talking about the other day, not necessarily about beauty, just about healthcare. That we have this strange. If you look in most anatomy textbooks, like you're not going to see people of color drawn. It's all like
and
Crayola flesh
that's
tone.
and that's more of a problem than just representation, right?
Oh, it
Like
is.
I
Yeah.
read things about doc where like skin diseases, for example, a
Oh,
lot
yeah.
of
They look
doctors
different.
cannot see them on people with different skin tones, and they're like, oh, because skin tone is different, so the disease looks different on you.
Yeah, it's because they've never seen it on that skin tone, even though it happens to those
It
people
happens to all people,
because they
exactly,
have
right? Yeah,
skin.
they have skin.
Um, but the doctors can't identify it or don't know how to differentially diagnose it because they've never seen it on that skin before. Because the only time they see it is in textbooks
Yep,
or prosection or
yep.
whatever, when it's on skin of white people.
Right, and so,
So,
so this idea of bodies is interesting because I remember when Lucian and I were working on Honey and Hot West, we are like, well, what do we want for the cover art?
mm,
Um, and Lucian brought a really good point up. It's like, let's not show people bodies on the cover because we don't want someone to look at the game and be like, this is a game about erotic games,
but
but
not for
not
me.
for my body,
Yeah,
right? We don't want a skinny person looking and be like, no, there's a fat person on the cover. We don't want a fat person looking and say there's a skinny person on the cover. We don't want any of that. That's why we're like, okay, we want the cover basically to not show bodies so that we want it to be like, this is for everyone because eroticism is for anyone who wants it, right?
yeah,
I'm not gonna say everyone because for a lot of people they don't want it, which is also
sure.
fine.
Yep.
But for anyone who, and I'm not saying ace people shouldn't look at the book. There are lots of games in there that could still interest you. But especially because most of the games actually use many of the games use eroticism to talk about other things.
Right.
But like, yeah, we made that. Lucian had the really good point. Consciously, let's not depict bodies on this cover because
Lucian's a smart cookie.
Lucian's he was a co-editor. He was a great co-editor. So
So your most recent project is the Tome of Dark Delights, which
yeah.
started out as a joke, right?
Yes, it started as a joke. I was actually up late writing for Avatar. I was up late writing for Avatar.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if I'm a good boy and I can finish my work by 1 a.m., I will treat myself and write a Twitter thread called "How Does Each D&D Character Class Fuck?"
Right, because they do.
Right, of course they do, right? And so I'm like, great. I wasn't a good boy. I finished at 4 a.m. But I'm like, hey, but I still want to write this thread. So I'm like, well, I'm going to sleep now. And the next afternoon, I'm like, let me write this thread. And it was tweet length microfictions, basically. Like each tweet, it was a thread. Each tweet was a micro story about a
The
character,
paladin.
the paladin,
druid.
the druid. And I wanted it to be very sex positive. I
Mhm.
didn't want it to be like, oh, the cleric doesn't like having sex. He is bad at it, whatever, right? That's stupid, right? I wanted to be very sex positive. So I wrote the thread. It was very fun to write. So that was key. I had a lot of fun writing it.
Right.
And it was very well received. Like a lot of people were like, oh my God. And my flatmate, remember, who I work with often, was like, Sharang, what do people like? D&D. What do people like? Erotic stuff. What did you just do? The intersection. So I'm writing this anthology of flash fiction, so around 2,000-ish words each about one of the D&D character classes.
Right.
And at the end of each flash fiction, which are erotic, I also have a little like sex move,
Right.
kind of like Alder's Monster Hearts and Miguel and Vincent Baker.
Oh no!
Is
There we go.
Sorry,
I think you're cutting out, Sharang.
did I?
I'm gonna fill in the blanks.
I know.
I can hear you, but I can't see. You're not moving. There you are. Oh, you're moving a little bit. So there's a little bit of a transmission error. Let's see what's going to happen here. But Sharang was talking about, just keep doing that until you're fluid. Oh, there you are. You're fluid now. You're fluid now. You're fluid now.
Great. Yeah. So I was inspired by Vincent McGay's Baker's Mom and Avery Alder's Apocalypse World and Monster Heart, where they have these sex moves. Just after you have an intimate moment, this game mechanic thing happens. So I made a couple. They're going at the bottom of the stories, and I'm doing that. And I have the first story up for free on itch.io, which you can see the link now. That's happily put up. The first story is you can download for free. The Kickstarter is going to come in January for the full anthology. The anthology is going to be part 1, which is going to be 6 stories, and then I'll make a part 2 just because I don't want to write so much in one go. It's hard.
Sure. It is, and you're lazy. Hey, you said
but yeah, and so check out the itch. There's also a little if you want to donate, I'm gonna get my voice actor friend to do an audio version of the first
I read
story.
that today for the first time. It's like, oh, really? That's really cool. That's a great idea.
He also has a very sexy voice.
I've never heard him.
Oh, but you will. One of his acting gigs is he records gay romance novels.
Oh, okay, that's cool.
Because he has a
very sexy voice.
Yeah, but actually, so I'm like, hey, can I pay you to do the first story if we make $300? And he's like, sure. And the Kickstarter will have.
Said sure, but much sexier than that.
Sure. Not like that. Much better.
Much better.
So yeah, but I'm really happy. It's a kind of a delightful thing to write. I'm trying to both engage in like tropes of romance and also like some new stuff. It's very queer. I'm trying to make it like polyamory friendly. I'm trying to show like non-traditional relationships. And it's interesting because one of the people who wrote praise for the book, Dave Ring, he's one of my editors. He told me he feels there's a difference between quote one-handers end quote and erotic stories, right?
There are. Yeah.
And he says yours aren't really one-handers. He said they're hot, but they're not really one-handers, but they are erotic stories. But then someone else said that, oh, I'd jerk off to that. I'm like, oh, okay, yay. So that's cool.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So there's a couple other people who are in our circles who are writing not similar, but kind of similar, I guess. Like Kate Bullock is writing the monster ones, and I think it's just fascinating that there's room and there's space in the genre to write about erotic things, to bring that to the table or maybe away from the table. So, I mean, that might be the other thing that I think this is kind of getting at in some way, as I'm just thinking and talking right now with you, that maybe this is a good way to take it not off the table, but away from the table, if you know what I mean, where we have so many calibration tools and safety tools or whatever you'd like to call them. I think the descriptor of the day is calibration tools. So
I like using the term calibration more than safety.
Me too.
Because if I tell a new player safety tools, like, what am I doing? That's
what is unsafe? What? Right.
Like, so actually hit me with a sword. Yeah.
Yes. No. Unless it's like
bar for LARP.
But the idea of it's okay to think this way. It's okay to have these thoughts. What's not okay is imposing those thoughts on other people at a table where people may not want that, right? So living out your power fantasies or your sexual fantasies on a game table may not be exactly the way that we want to do things, because games are very different than movies and books where we are a sole solitary audience member consuming that piece. As Sharang has so aptly brought up, games are about verbs and doing things. And even in a RPG setting where we're doing things, we have to be careful about how we do said things. And so maybe this whole idea of these things that are for some reason, considered subversive, can we do it in a way that is positive, but safe for the table? I mean, that is a safety thing right there. But I think that's really an interesting way of thinking about it, so that eventually there can be things like, there already are things where you've calibrated the whole group to play the game where it is about, like you said, sex acts or simulated sex acts, or talking about sexuality. There are definitely games that do that, and there definitely should be games that do that, but they're set up that way. Where it's not super cool is in the middle of your dungeoneering adventure when somebody starts to do that kind of thing when the whole table has said, let's not do that at all.
Yep,
Right.
yep, yep.
And I think having these sort of outlets like speculative fiction about these things that are game adjacent, that even have mechanics in them,
If you
um,
want to use them,
if you want to
exactly.
use them, right, that's when it becomes interesting and
And
cool.
we both know one of the fun things about RPG books rule book is that sometimes they don't get played, but the enjoyment comes from imagining the mechanics,
Yeah,
right?
just reading it and seeing, oh,
Because you're
that
like,
would be really
ooh,
cool
that
to
would be
happen.
really fun. Exactly. Oh, that would be fun to do. Oh, I want to make this kind of character. So even like if you read the book and you're like, oh, that's a fun sex move. Haha, I'll never play that with my group, but that's kind of fun, right?
Mhm. Oh
Um,
yeah, I mean, 100%. I don't think my table ever used any of the intimate relationship moves in, say, Apocalypse World,
mhm.
until like way later when they were more comfortable with each other. And my table was made up of like couples of people who were
Right,
like married to
right,
each other, and
right.
they still didn't feel like they could do that because there is some taboo around that kind of stuff in a game, right? Because a game should be something families can play together and kid, there is that strange stigma around games that there isn't about books or movies
Right.
or
Books are like some books are for kids and some are not. Games, that's the
all
same
for kids.
thing. Right. That's the thing. There's still the widespread notion that games are all for kids.
Right.
Hi,
And so
Pikachu.
we talked about this earlier, that and off stream, so everybody can hear it now, I guess, is that both Sharang and I believe that games are an art form, and being able to do this, being able to do sex positive games, being able to do that kind of shows us a little bit, don't you think, everybody, that games might actually be more of an art form than a product. And they can be both, right? They literally can be both things at the
Just
same
like
time.
film is both,
Yeah,
right?
we we
Music
we
is
have
both.
multitudes. Games can contain multitudes. Oh, well, I remember asking you, "Do you think you could talk for an hour about just you?" And you're like, "Yes, of course you can do it. He can do it. There it is."
I'm paid to be a professor. I could talk for long periods of time,
Yes,
Senfung. You know
I
this.
know,
You're a
I know.
professor.
5 hours, go.
Go.
Okay, that's what I did today. 5 hours, like a 5-hour lecture. It was not great. Well, it was great. I mean, obviously the students learned stuff, but it was just 5 hours. Let's see. So we're gonna shut down the show because I gotta go to bed. Because I'm an old man. But where can people find you?
Yeah, so I'm pretty active on Twitter at Sharang Biswas, as you can see. I have an Instagram, also Sharang Biswas. I only post rarely on that. My Twitter should link to my website, which should also link to my itch page, which is astrolingus.itch.io, which Sen shared a link to the specific, their project before. But yeah, I'm very active on Twitter, so feel free to like ask me stuff. My DMs aren't like fully open, but I get the like notification that someone you don't know has DM'd. Do you want to usually check them? Not always, but tweet at me and I'll, yeah.
Yeah. And this is actually where you can find the seeds of a lot of Sharang's writing. It all starts on Twitter. A lot of it just starts on Twitter. Like, what if I did this? And I guess I'm doing that now.
There's one idea that I got for about like you're a game about you're an apprentice and you have to deal with all the romantic fallout from your master who just dates all these people and then breaks up with them. I'm like, and everyone like, we want this game. I'm like, I need to make this game. So
What's the verb gonna be?
I have not decided yet.
Okay, well, when you do, let us know. Awesome. So you can find Sharang there. You can find me at Senfeng Lim on Twitter, often talking to Sharang on Twitter. Erica, who is not here tonight because she is packing for PAX. Oh, hey, let's talk about that for like a brief second.
Yeah.
Sharang, you're going to be at PAX as well.
Yes, I'm going to be at PAX on Thursday. I'm running a game of Lucian Khan's Visigoths versus Molgoths live. So check that out. It's a very
I thought you were going Friday.
Yeah, that's Friday.
Okay.
Did I say something else?
You said Thursday.
My bad. On Friday, I am running a game of Visigoths versus Molgoths live audience in conjunction with GamerX. And on Saturday, also in conjunction with GamerX, I'm on a panel about sex and games.
There you go. Hey, you could just have this whole talk all over again.
I have a lot to say. So
he really does.
And there'll be a lot of other really cool panelists.
Yes, it's not just Sharang.
It's not just me. So check that out. And
who else is on the panel with you?
Richard Ruane, who is designer of like Moonlight and Roseville Beach and things like that. Tanya DePass,
Mhm.
some of the GamerX folks, and one more person who I can't remember right now because I do a lot of panels. So
Lots of panels.
and yeah, if you can't tell who I am, look at these amazing nails, and if you find that, that's me.
They are wonderful nails. Hey, Sharang, are you planning on coming up to Breakout next year?
I haven't decided yet.
Okay, well, let us know.
It's coming soon, right? Because it's early in
Yeah,
the year.
it's usually March break, so I'm not sure exactly when it's going to be this
Okay.
year, but
I mean, if I'm invited as a speaker again, I might. I was invited once, so
yeah, I think Mendez is coming, so it'd be nice to get the
nice.
group back
Yeah, I
together.
was the first time I went to Breakout. I was on a panel with Mendez, so
Right. Yeah.
yeah, one of our Asian panels.
Yeah, we're not doing that this year. We're over that. We're doing more combat stuff, I think, because we like talking about fighting.
Nice.
Remember how fighting is part of human history?
Yep.
Well, Mendez and I are historians, apparently. we
Of
like fighting.
fights. I mean,
Yeah.
both of you are actual fighters,
Yeah. So
right? So
we like to fight.
both of you have martial arts stuff. So
Yeah, there you go. Alara will be back in the new year, and you can reach her at TT Void. And if you want to see us, talk to us directly at Meeple Syrup, though, usually it's easier just to reach us through our regular own individual channels. If you like what you saw tonight, and if you want to see more, and if you'd like to help us keep the lights on, please do check out the Patreon at www.patreon.com/MeepleSyrup. It does go towards, it will actually, it hasn't yet, because we started this just before the pandemic started. And it will go towards helping new people, underrepresented people get to conventions. That's one of the things we're aiming to do with some of the money, along with some other things. So we will figure out how to do that once conventions start rolling in. Sharang, do you have any final advice for our listeners?
yeah, so I do a lot of role playing games. I do a lot of role playing games with Sen. So one thing I think is really important for designers is to play a lot of role playing games of different kinds. So play your D&D, play your Pathfinder, big name, but also like look for tiny games, play them with friends. You don't have to stream all of them. Don't worry, you can just play sometimes with friends.
Yeah, streaming has
Um,
been a thing,
it's
especially
great to stream
over the
them.
pandemic. It's been a real
Yeah,
thing.
but
Yeah.
don't feel pressured. I must stream this. Like, play lots of interesting games. Support indie designers because they support you in turn. But that's how you like think about new ways of doing games. And apart from that, consume other kinds of art
Yeah.
because all arts can like dialogue with each other, and you will get great ideas and thoughts and think of things differently if you consume various kinds of art. If you want to be a game designer. So.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that you mentioned, this is primarily a board game channel, but I think because I do a lot of RPGs, I like the RPG side of thing as well. That I learned the most from different things. Just like Sharang was saying earlier, that when he looks at different types of works of art, that is what really inspires him. Same thing for me. So when I started board game design, I actually listened to more RPG design podcasts, and I think that actually helped me a lot more than listening to board game design podcasts, and vice versa. I think that some RPG designers could benefit from listening to board game design podcasts, but all of us could benefit from listening to things like 99% Invisible or whatever, where we're getting all sorts of real world outside sources of inspiration that really do kind of tweak our interests. And to be honest, that is where I get a lot of game ideas is from listening to podcasts, right? And from consuming other media critically. So there you go. Thank you very much, Sharang. It was lovely to have you here.
Thank you for
Finally.
having me, man.
Well, I mean, the last time I asked you on, you double booked, so
I
never
didn't.
gonna let you live that down. You did a bad. It's
I
okay.
was bad.
I still love you. It's all right. And next week on the show, you can join us to see Jay Bell. Jay Bell is a new up and coming designer from Louisiana area, and he will actually be at PAX as well, I believe. So maybe you'll run into him there, Sharang. Jay is a wonderful dude, and we'll have him here next week. Thanks very much for everybody who's watching and in the chat, and we'll talk to you all later. See ya.